You are an event professional. And so I am dying to know what the best party is that you've ever been to.
I don't know if I could pick the best because I've had the opportunity just because of this space to have so many incredible experiences. But the event that turned me on to this industry, where it was the first time I sat back and was like, oh, wow, there is an entire ecosystem of businesses and there's such opportunity inside this space, was one of my closest friends, her older sister, got married while we were in college. And Colin Cowie did her sister's wedding. And now I know him and I've gotten to do things with him. But at the time, that was my first experience inside this incredible world. And that was really my first taste. So I would say that event sticks out in my mind because that was my first experience. Now I've had the opportunity to be at so many different events that it would really be hard to pick just one.
But he's like a well-known event planner.
Yeah, Colin is he is an incredibly well-known event planner. I was actually in the middle of business school, and I had no intention of starting my own company. And the same friend whose sister's wedding I told you about, which was the first time I experienced, one of these just sort of magical events, if you will. She then got married right before I started business school. And again, it was just this moment where all of a sudden I realized that there was all this opportunity inside this industry. But what was the most interesting thing about it is that at the time, and this was, 2012, just to date myself when I started Carats and Cake, when I first started really thinking about what it could be, everyone was so focused on the end consumer and the couples celebrating every single year, where when you take a step back, the foundation of this industry are the professionals who serve it year over year. And it's the businesses. It's everyone from the photographer and the florist and the event planner down to the property and the hotel where you're actually celebrating. And I thought there was this opportunity to, build a brand that might look like it was consumer first, but really was so focused on empowering the businesses and building a place that, would celebrate their work as much as, the couples who were celebrating.
That is really an interesting way to think about things because a lot of people that listen to this podcast have big ideas and want to start companies, and to take an industry that's so established and view it from a different angle is fascinating.
And if you were in it from it's natural to look at, the consumers and the people celebrating every single year. But
It's
from
also
an
the
outsider,
flashier aspect.
100%. Yeah. And it's what gets a lot of attention, but you have 500,000 local businesses inside this industry that, there's $100 billion spent in the US alone every single year.
Mhm.
Yet so much of the focus has always been on the end consumer. And so I think that there's something for us, it was, build this community and then really learn what this community needs, come in, be business first, but then take the time to learn and really become friends with the businesses inside the space before you then start building for them. And that was a lot of our philosophy with Carats.
So, with Carats and Cake, for people who haven't heard of it, what is Carats and Cake?
So Carats and Cake now is the revenue optimization engine for the event industry, focused primarily on venues. What we do is we're building a better way for venues, which is the largest spend inside the space. About 60 to 80% of that $100 billion every single year is touched by venues and caterers inside the industry.
Really?
And so we're building a better way for them to run their businesses when it comes to how they invoice clients, how they attract them, and how they manage that revenue stream. That's what our full software stack does for them. And it started with, Carats and Cake, the community, and grew into where we are today because we knew in 2000, we knew when we started the business, and we knew even more as we learned that we could continue to do more. And in 2019 was a real turning point for us.
Mhm.
Luckily, it was before, 2020, but 2019, we knew that, we had worked with these brands. We had started to work with venues. We had started to help them think about new ways to better, stronger, if you will. But we knew we could do more. And the reality, it's easy to look at this industry and think that the single biggest challenge is planning an event. But the single biggest challenge is actually paying for an event. And it's a pain point that uniquely sits in the middle for both those celebrating, but also for the businesses inside the industry. One of the biggest pain points is how you collect payment, how you invoice, how
Mhm.
you're actually able to protect and empower and grow your revenue stream.
So I was reading articles about carrots and cake, and it seems like it's considered a disruptor in the wedding business. Some of the articles go as far as to say you have transformed the events industry, which is a pretty powerful statement. Do you remember the first time you had a vision of doing this differently?
It was actually probably my second year of business school. I would get up and I would work every morning on the idea for Carrots Cake, on essentially the business plan of
Yeah.
what I thought it could be. And that was where, when you really started to break down, you would hear from like the investor side and like putting on, some of my past experience, having worked in a hybrid VC family office, I always looked at things from like, well, where's the money? How are you going to make them? Like, where's the opportunity? Right. And when you broke it down and you started to, I went and talked to some investors, and everyone's response about the industry was interesting, is that they were concerned about, you have to chase a new consumer every single year and there's all this money, but then like your cost per acquisition of a new consumer every single year is so challenging, right? And that was the reason that, there had been people who had tried but never really been able to extrapolate like the real opportunity, the real value inside the space. um, and that was when I would always say to them, well, but what about the businesses? If you built something for the businesses and there's 500,000 of them, they're your repeat customer, right? So instead of going to the consumer and trying to disintermediate the consumer, if you touch the businesses, they're touching the $100 billion every single year, and you're not going to touch all of them, obviously, but then
Right.
you don't have the same issue. And for me, it was through those conversations that I knew that we were onto something, that we could really build a brand that would touch these businesses.
So when you say, transforming how they invoice, is
Yep.
it's software? Are you, because I saw on the website you're matching, people who are planning weddings with the venues, so there's a few aspects.
What we do with Carrots and Cake is, for the properties inside hospitality, really, we think that one of the biggest opportunities when you think about hospitality is event driven revenue. And when you look at event driven revenue, especially inside venues, which is where we focus today, it's usually only about 10 to 15% of their overall revenue stream. So it's natural that it wouldn't be a focus or would be overlooked. As a result, though, the majority of that business is
Mhm.
done without a purpose built system to help them manage that revenue, right? So a lot of the venues that we start working with, they are sending PDFs for contracts, they're sending paper invoices, they're asking
Mhm.
for checks. We have venues that we worked with that before us had no single point of digital payment collection. And so that's what we've started with. We've started with this custom built invoicing tool that allows venues for the first time to collect digital payment in a branded environment, that also then gives them access to additional financial products that their end consumers might want.
I saw an article come out that you raised 10.6 million in a Series A funding, which is really exciting. I All of my friends that are entrepreneurs that are women talk about the difficulties of raising money. Some of them say like it takes a year of their life away. uh, can you tell me about your experience? How did you feel?
Yeah, raising money is one of the hardest, most rewarding things that you do as an entrepreneur. We've raised almost 30 million over the last 18 months, so it's been like it feels like we've been fundraising nonstop. I think the thing is with fundraising is that you hear a lot of no's and you just have to be okay with that. I have the stories that you've probably heard from so many other entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs, where you're pitching close to 100 people and you're having conversations. But what happens at the end is you start to realize, in the beginning, you're like, oh, that investor would have been great, or their firm would have been great. But what you realize is the more conversations you have, the more no's you have. In the beginning, make you stronger so that you get yeses at the end. So like the conviction and the idea and the holes and what haven't you thought about and what's not clear on your story ultimately gets you to investors that believe in what you're doing, right? And so it's kind of like all those no's get you to a yes.
Mhm.
That being said, if you ask my husband, you ask, the closest people inside this company, I take every one of those no's personally. But what I heard recently, and I think is so true, is that, it's a no right now. It's not a no forever. It's just a no at that moment in time. I think the advice that someone gave me when we raised this last round, which was so helpful, is that it's easy to like build a list of who you want to invest. I think that I got to go talk to those people first. But the reality is, you need to go talk to not those people first. You need to go talk to people and start to pressure test your story with friendlies and people that are going to be, kind in how they deliver the feedback, and no matter how painful it is, but they help you poke holes. They help you find, what's the weakness in your story? What are people going to respond to? And then from there, talk to, more people that might be interested, but don't pitch
Yeah.
your dream investor first, because you won't have had the opportunity to learn about how to tell your story. And part of it at that is also just timing, right? You hit an investor with the right time, with the right story, with the right opportunity, and it works.
Talk to me about the role of storytelling in raising money.
It is one of the most powerful tools. A lot of investors talk about sort of the narrative of what you're building or the story and how you articulate that story. Um, it's super powerful, just like with anything in life, honing what your story is. And I think the thing for founders is that story starts to evolve, right? Like the story is about your journey, but it's a constant evolution. The other thing that's so hard is that everyone you talk to can give you different feedback. And
Mhm.
so as an entrepreneur, that sort of like gut of listening to what you actually believe otherwise. And like I found myself here, in that recently, is that you then start telling a story that's inauthentic to you because you think that's what people want to hear. But the reality is if you don't stay true to your own narrative, it's not going to resonate with anybody else.
So, I was surprised researching for this interview that the average couple spends $33,000 on their wedding.
Hmm.
You mentioned this, it's a $60 billion industry a year, which is wild. And it's fueled by these small businesses that you're helping. When you look at the finances, I've heard you talk about hidden costs. When you look
Hmm.
at a wedding rundown, what do you think is the biggest waste of money?
I think the biggest waste of money is when you spend on something that is not important to you, but you do it because you think it's what you're supposed to do. Whether you do it for the photographs, but not for the experience of your guests, or whether you do something because someone else is telling you that's what you should do. I think ultimately that's where people end up wasting money, right? Where they spend too much on decor and don't worry enough about the experience of their guests, or they spend too much on something that matters to another stakeholder in the event, because the average wedding has about six different people financially contributing, which can be challenging, right? Yeah, so then you have a lot of different emotions and a lot
And a
of
lot of
different
cooks in the kitchen.
expecting you to do things. And that, I mean, that's when people talk about how stressful planning a wedding can be, because you have high financial spend and you have a lot of different decision makers who have buy-in on that spend.
It's also most of the time, the very first time that a couple is really talking about money in a large way.
100%. And it's the beginning, if you think about it, it's the beginning of this new financial family unit, right? So for the first, like you've got a couple who is always, probably independent, and then their parents were involved in their life supporting or what have you. And then now you've got this couple, and then you've got the parents that then have to come together on top of that couple. And they all have to align on spending more money than anyone's ever spent in their entire life on a day.
Are less people doing that nowadays?
Interestingly enough, no. I would say special about where we are in this moment in time is that the last couple of years have taught people how important moments are. So, and being able to celebrate and gather and be together for special moments.
Okay, I do have some rapid fire before we
Yeah.
end. So, a small gesture or favor at a party that you've attended that you'll never forget.
A friend did handwritten notes, but in like calligraphy for every guest. So it was almost like a keepsake. That was like a
Oh.
"I love you." Yeah, really special. And something that I think is pretty accessible regardless of what a budget is. I actually borrowed it for my own wedding and did the same thing for our wedding party.
A food or drink that's an unexpected crowd pleaser.
Anything sweet. I have a big sweet tooth. I think anything sweet is just people love.
One wedding no, should we say, that you see often.
I would say like the biggest wedding no-no is as much as it's about you, it's also about the guests and it's about the people celebrating with you. So just make sure you think about with the experience.
That's a great one. Okay, a book that you've read that you feel like changed your life and everybody should read.
When my son was born, somebody gave us this book called What You Do with an Idea. And it might have been the hormones, but I fully broke down crying reading it. And it's a children's book, and it's super short. Everybody should read. But it talks about the entrepreneurial journey, if you will, but from like a child's eyes. And it really, for me, summed up my journey in that the child has this idea. People tell him it's a terrible idea. He then like ignores it. He then, is unhappy, then has his idea, learns how to foster it, and doesn't realize that it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's like he values the idea. It's a really beautiful book. It's super short, but it really, like, for me, crystallizes what this journey has been and continues to be.
I haven't heard about it. I love a story of resilience. So
I will
thank you
send
for
that to
sharing
you.
that. What's been your hardest day as an entrepreneur?
This is probably what everybody says, but the lows, like the peaks and the valleys that sometimes can happen within, seconds. I think that that's the hardest thing, and when I first started the business, it was like a roller coaster. But I think it's also, as crazy as it sounds, the best part about this journey is that like you can have the highest highs and the lowest lows. And what you realize is that no matter how low it is, it's always going to get high. And sometimes like the farther along you get, like it becomes less of a roller coaster at certain points, or maybe you just get better at dealing with it.
I think maybe it's that you have the experience in knowing that they don't stick around. Like there will be another high. You're not in the low forever. We pray. When you were bootstrapping those 8 years, did you ever feel like, holy shit, this isn't going to work? Or you always knew?
All the time.
Really?
Not from a it isn't going to work, but it's like a we're not going to make it. Do you know what I mean? Like I've never doubted what this company can be and what I believe this company can be. And it's one of the things that I pinch myself about every single day to get to be here now building something with this team. During those first 8 years, yeah, there was moments where I mean we were living like week to week, cash flow to cash. There were some very tricky moments in time, and I think that that's it's part of what shaped me as a founder. It's part of what shaped this business and how we think about things. But yeah, it was never just like, oh, this is always going to work. There were definitely some very, very dark moments, and some very dark corners of some very dark we works, at moments in time.
I so appreciate you sharing that. I started a card deck of questions that I sent you.
Mhm.
Wait, you have it? Okay, so usually I pick one, but you have it in front of you. So will you
I
pick
have it
one
in front of
out?
me. Scroll through your Instagram. Which photo represents the true you and why?
Ooh, no one's ever picked that one on the pod.
Uh, Probably this one, which is like just balancing it all, which is like, the epitome of the entrepreneurial journey where I think my son is like 6 months in that photo. I've got, two devices, as you can see. Probably not pictured somewhere is, someone else on the team. Like it's just that's it, where it's like your life is this messy journey. And sometimes, there's probably spit up on my shirt. Not, I think in this photo, I probably haven't washed my hair in like, 5 days type of deal. It's like, you're making it work.
It's beautiful. Okay, I
Yeah.
ask everybody this question. It's the first thing that comes to your mind. What is the smartest decision you've ever made?
Building a life in New York City, probably. I'm building this business in New York City. I think that the energy, the talent, the access to entrepreneurs, the startup ecosystem, the event industry here, like everything here, I think has been an incredible decision for us as a business and for me personally.
That city vibrates.
It really does.
It
Couldn't live anywhere
does.
else.
I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for this. I'm really glad that we were able to make it happen.
Me too. Me too.